Okay, let's get started because I know you're all very, very busy people. First of all, thank you very much for joining us this morning. This is in fact our eighth discussion of the year.
This meeting is being recorded.
Thank you. And for those that actually went on our previous call, please could you mute your sound. We will obviously ask you to engage and ask questions throughout. There's a little box at the bottom of the screen on Zoom, which you're probably familiar with by now. A little chat box. Please put any questions in there or raise your hand as we go through the presentations. We're pretty informal. For those not met me before, I'm Stephen Knight. I'm the CEO and founder of Pimento. I'm very excited to be talking about a very hot topic this morning. And today's session is entitled The Metaverse, Immediate Opportunities for Brands and Agencies. And I really do feel, and hopefully you'll take out from today's presentation, that there are opportunities for both. Many of you will be familiar with some of the fashion and luxury brands that have been jumping into the Metaverse to explore the opportunity. And some of you have witnessed the success of Nikeland or Nikeland, depending on how you like to pronounce it, which has gone from proof to concept to mainstream success, delivering 26% of Nike's total brand revenue. To date, they've attracted over 21 million visitors and they've managed to sell a pair of digital-only trainers for £138,000. Can you believe it? So they're certainly a brand, I guess, that's actually always involved in what I call first mover marketing trends and one to watch. But if we look beyond fashion and luxury brands, where else is there are opportunities for brands today? I'm certainly keen to kind of explore this new frontier for brands. But at the same time, I'm conscious this could still be the Wild West. To help me today, I've got Rohit Talwar, who is the CEO of Fast Future, a global futurist, award-winning keynote speaker, author, and CEO of Fast Future. Rohit provides powerful insights into disruptive developments such as AI, cryptocurrencies, blockchain tech, metaverse, NFTs, and more. His global clients include governments in Singapore, Finland, the US, and closer to home here in the UK. And he also advises businesses like American Express, BP, IBM, Intel, McKinsey, Microsoft, and many, many more. Charlotte Bunyan is the Chief Strategic Officer at Cult London and in New York. Charlotte looks after the innovation arm of Cult, and she helps brands explore the next evolution of marketing with a focus on emerging creative technologies and, of course, Web3. Alistair Bryan is co-founder of Flox. Alistair is a business leader with 25 years experience, successfully growing marketing agencies and working with an array of global blue chip clients. He co-founded Flox, a metaverse events and brand experience platform, which is already working with the likes of PepsiCo, Lego Foundation, and Molson. So great to have you all with us this morning. Thank you for taking time to join us. This is in fact probably, I think, the largest number of people we've had on the call this year. So certainly it's a hot topic, as I say. Let's start, I think, by kind of a definition of what the metaverse is and what it isn't. You probably have the opportunity, or perhaps not, to have a look at the wiki definition. I'm going to kind of quote it to you, and then we'll try to unpick it afterwards. In futurism and science fiction, the metaverse is a hypothetical iteration of the internet as a single, universal, and immersive visual world. It is facilitated by the use of virtual reality, VR, and augmented reality, AR headsets. In colloquial use, a metaverse is a network of 3D visual worlds focused on connections. The term metaverse originated in the 1992 science fiction novel Snow Crash, and metaverse development is often linked to advancing virtual reality technology due to its increasing demands for immersion. Recent interest in metaverse development is influenced by Web3, a concept for a decentralized iteration of the internet. Web3 and the metaverse have been used as buzzwords to exaggerate development progress of various related technologies and projects for PR purposes. Information privacy, user addiction, and user safety are concerns with the metaverse stemming from challenging facing the social media and video games industries as a whole. So, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I think it's a very confusing description of the metaverse. I'm not sure how helpful it really is. Maybe it's just simpler really to describe the metaverse as the internet, but in 3D. I guess a digital interaction where connected virtual experiences can either stimulate the real world or imagine worlds beyond it. Rohit, I mean, you've written books on this whole subject and you're well versed on the metaverse. Perhaps you could give us a kind of a better description than the one I've just offered up onto why there is huge buzz around the metaverse and the concepts. And perhaps you could explain what the landscape is and why you believe now is right for brands and agencies to dip their toes into this virtual world.
Sure. Well, thank you, Stephen, for having me here, and good morning to everyone. I'm going to just use a couple of slides to quickly talk through what I think the metaverse concept is, and kind of how people are using it. So the easiest way of thinking about it is metaverse is a really digital Disneyland. Today we have over 400 million people using them, the majority of whom, over 50%, are aged under 13 and over 80% are aged under 18. And so that's where we got to get our heads around it. The majority of people there have come in as gamers. But what we're seeing is brands are getting involved, and all of the investment banks have done their research, and JP Morgan say this could be $1 trillion opportunity by 2030. Citi have bid everyone else, and they say it's 13 trillion. No one knows yet. It's so early in the game, we don't know. And there are some different types of metaverses. So just quickly run through. The most common ones are the virtual gaming worlds. You will probably heard of them. And they have typically between 10 million and 40 million daily users or monthly users. Roblox is the most popular. In those, you can't buy land, but you can, in most cases, you can create experiences. Somewhere like Fortnite, what you can do, what they've done is partner with brands. So they're working brands like Marvel into the script of the game. You can buy outfits of skins for your characters based on other brands. So there are different ways in which brands are getting involved in those. The second area are the decentralized ones, based on blockchain. We won't get into the technicalities of that, but very important to understand that when people talk about blockchain and Web3 and metaverse in the same breath, they're not the same thing. But what you're seeing is a few emerging now, like Sandbox and Decentraland, that are the most popular. But these typically have between 10,000 and 1 million active users. So they're much smaller, much less of a kind of proposition right now. You've also got players like Meta, who've spent something like $20 million building their Horizon Worlds proposition. Again, people are starting to create experiences there, but very low user numbers right now. Then you've got the sort of corporate workspaces like Microsoft Mesh, where you can have meetings, you can hold events, you can create more and more activities, corporate showrooms. It's an extension of Teams, and it's become pretty popular. And then you're seeing the private ones where people like BNP Paribas have created their own private virtual world where people can get involved. And you're going to hear a lot more about that from the others shortly, or not that particular example. The sort of things people are doing. So Samsung used Decentraland to launch a new mobile phone product, get people engaged. As you can see from all these things already, the graphics are not the kind of CGI type thing you would see in a film. They're still more basic. They still look more like kind of computer games right now. And that's because of the speed at which we're trying to render all this content. But you're seeing more and more brands get involved. So Hyundai, targeting a younger generation to get them interested in cars. They have a theme park. You can design your own car. You can take part in all sorts of experiences. The most prominent example everyone cites is Fortnite, where Ariana Grande did a concert last year as an experience. You could interact with it. 78 million people participated over 2 days, and they raised over 20 million selling digital merchandise. So you could buy various things for your characters to wear, to own as limited editions, but really demonstrated the monetization potential and the reach that you couldn't get in any other way. Most of the big players in there are brands in retail, in leisure. So Gucci, for example, celebrated their 100th anniversary with a physical garden in Florence and a virtual version in Roblox, where they again made $2 million in people buying different things from their virtual experience. And that lives on long after the physical garden. This is the maddest one I've seen so far, which is in China as part of a shopping festival. They took 11 brands. Each of them was represented by a musical instrument. So the one you see on screen is Gerlan. And they created a musical symphony of which millions of people in China watched and loved and used to then buy brands. There's no example of the product that they offer here. It's just bringing the brand to life again for that target audience of predominantly young people aged under 25. And then give you a couple of examples of the good and the bad. So JP Morgan, because they launched a report saying they think the metaverse could be worth, or metaverses could be worth $1 trillion, they had to do something. So they launched this metaverse at the same time called Onyx. In it, you have a tiger to greet you, a portrait of their CEO, and a PowerPoint presentation on what they think the future of payments is. Really unclear as to who they're targeting and why they think that an 18-year-old would want to go and see that. I don't know, but they have bigger ambitions. But right now, what they have is not very not generating much positive news. And apologies to anyone involved in JP Morgan. Contrast that with these guys, Quantic. They're a digital bank, and what they've created is what they call an outpost. They're deliberately not calling it a branch, and they get who they're targeting. They're trying to get an audience that hasn't yet engaged with banking, that wants to hang out somewhere on the web, in metaverses. So they have a DJ set, they have NFT drops on a regular basis, a lot of content to gradually introduce people to banking and financial services. So they get their audience far better. And then just to finish, you're starting to see people buying land, real estate brokers coming in, people offering mortgages, and then offering next generation banking products. So one of the things is, if I've grown up digital, I've grown up gaming, I probably have more value in the assets I've earned from gaming, the loot I've earned, than I do in real cash. So these guys, Zelf, have set themselves up as the first bank of the metaverse, where in your account, you can have your cash, you can have the NFTs you bought, you can also have the rewards you've earned in games, and they're going to add crypto. And when you want to spend that in the physical world, you just put that onto a Visa card and you can go and spend it as real cash. So you're starting to see some very interesting propositions emerge. And I think what we're really just at the start point now, and you're going to hear a lot of examples from Charlotte and Alistair of just what people are doing. A lot of these propositions, like Minecraft, Fortnite, weren't designed for brands to make money in the first place. They're learning how to do it. The newer ones like Decentraland and Sandbox are much more focused on you buying land, building your own experience, and monetizing it. But we're at a very early stage now. And of all the new platforms that are emerging, I think the common thing with any tech development in the past is you can pretty much expect that 95 to 99% of the brands you hear about today in the metaverse space will have gone within 2 years. And there'll be a few that survive. So for every Facebook, there are tens of thousands of platforms that fail. For every Google, for every Amazon, we know there are loads that have failed. So we can't get hooked on any one particular brand right now. I think the important thing is just understanding why people are using them, how they work, the kinds of experiences they're creating, the kinds of audiences they're targeting, and who you need internally to lead this. You need people who understand this, who get gaming, who get the nature of the interactive experiences you want to create. And you certainly don't want to end up with the kind of outcome that JP Morgan had, where you're going to get laughed at, and that's not a good thing. So hopefully that's a kind of quick way of just getting us started on this, and I think I'll stop there.
No, thank you very much indeed. That really does describe in some detail the landscape and also the opportunities. Charlotte, the metaverse in recent times has got a bit of a bad rap. I mean, people have been accusing it of all sorts of things, not least of which, of course, it's incredibly immersive. It's very, very powerful. It's one of those environments that basically has the power to do massive good, but equally too, if we're not careful, it could actually do harm. How are your clients using it at Cult? What are they doing with the metaverse, and how are you advising them the best way to go about a metaverse strategy?
Yeah, I think it's a really important question, and Rohit touched on a little bit on this already, which is understanding who your audience is and understanding what value your brand is bringing on the right platforms. And I know often some of this can feel quite abstract, so I'm just going to share again a few slides just to sort of hopefully help bring this to life a little bit. I think there's the key things that we're seeing in terms of brands being able to do good are, how you being more inclusive, how you making sure that this experience is more accessible, and obviously by being virtual it can be more accessible. And I think this example here by Degree, which is a Unilever brand, is creating the first metathon, the first marathon in the metaverse in Decentraland in this example, which is really embracing kind of disability, showing that you can have, different sort of prosthesis in the metaverse, and really embracing their own brand purpose, which is around encouraging people to sort of embrace movement. I think also community is huge, and recognizing the value that you're able to give back to the community that you are connecting with. This example from NYX, the beauty brand, is I think a really great one, where they are showing that it isn't just about showing up as a brand, it's about how are you engaging with and rewarding the community that you are interacting with. And this is a program that they set up to essentially support digital makeup artists. Again, I think one of the key recognitions here is that there's a new talent pipeline that we need to be aware of. We're needing to sort of understand who is creating these experiences, how are they engaging with it, what are they looking for, how can we sort of encourage and enable them to sort of create the kind of experiences that people and brands want to engage with. So I think that's, again, an interesting point around Roblox, which is that you actually have, lots of Gen Alpha, Gen Z who are monetizing their ability to create on these platforms. I think that's, again, another really interesting area that brands can be exploring. We also recognize that there should be, and there is, a sustainability angle. And I'm sure this is something that Alistair is going to talk about as well. I think it's a very sort of noteworthy stat that 97% reduced carbon footprint from digital wearables to physical. And that's something that Cult explored earlier this year in partnership with DressX, which is a multi-brand digital garment retailer. We worked with 4 sort of less well-known digital artists, up and coming, all from different sort of diverse backgrounds, to create 4 items of digital clothing that can be worn in the metaverse. And this, again, is another area that brands can begin thinking about, which is the direct to avatar market, a little bit like the examples that Rohit was sharing earlier. There's lots of different figures around this. One of the ones that I sort of pulled out was it's going to be worth $50 billion by the end of this year. And this is people buying skins for their gaming avatar. This is people wearing digital clothing across these platforms, and this is an opportunity for brands to sort of think about their sustainability as much as sort of creating something for people who are engaging in these experiences. Just to recognize too that there is kind of a revenue angle to this, and I think importantly, Rohit touched a little bit there on sort of the audiences for much of these sort of metaverse platforms. Many brands, and it's interesting seeing a lot of luxury brands, are recognizing the opportunity for them to reach younger audiences who are not engaging with traditional advertising and marketing, who are not engaging with sort of the usual way that brands might be able to reach and acquire sort of a pipeline of new customers. The gaming industry is one where your attention is not partial and you are not blocking ads, you are fully immersed in it. And Ralph Lauren, I think, is a great example here of a luxury brand that it's driven 58% new customer acquisition through its activations across Roblox, a 40% boost to its digital sales, and a recognition that this is actually contributing quite significantly to its third quarter revenue from last year. So I think there's still work to be done, and I'm not saying that it's a utopia. There are still things that brands need to be figuring out, that platforms need to be figuring out, but there are certainly some really great steps being made in this space to do good, as well as to actually drive value for brands and for consumers.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Charlotte. So, I mean, to what extent do you think the normal rules apply in marketing? I mean, the starting point from what Rohit's described and what you've described is that this is an environment at the moment that's lived in by tweens, teens, and people under the age of 20. It's their world. It's evolved from the world of gaming. What I call adult brands like JP Morgan and others that are kind of decided to actually enter that particular world have done it without necessarily fully understanding the environment, understanding the language they should be using. So as ever, it's about context, and one has to think about actually both the environment and think about the audience and think about actually where they're coming from and their expectations, as opposed to us putting our expectations and understanding onto their particular media.
Absolutely, but that's, the point you just made, which is, one of the first rules is understand your audience, understand what they're doing, how they're behaving, what are they interacting with, what's the value as a brand, what is the value exchange, why are you showing up there and what are you giving them? I think it's also worth saying that, yes, these audiences skew younger, but there are many platforms which are targeting older audiences. And when you look at, for example, engagement with NFTs or purchase of NFTs, that's a much older audience. That is not a Gen Alpha or a Gen Z. That's, skewing more sort of millennial, even, Gen X. So recognizing that there are different platforms who have different demographics, and therefore what are you creating on those platforms to engage with those audiences, really the sort of first step when you begin looking at what is the right metaverse strategy for your brand.
Okay, well, that's a nice link into Alice's world, because Alice, you're very much talking to what I call adults in the work that you do. Can you give us kind of a brief overview of the world you've created and how brands are using it?
Yeah, thanks very much, Stephen. Yeah, I mean, I suppose our backdrop was around application, which, I think Charlotte was really touching on then, which is having an app, a reason for being in the metaverse. And Rohit said it very well. The JP Morgan one was oh my God, we've got to be on the metaverse. And then because it's without purpose, you end up with a scenario where the application is not needed. So our starting point was an application that we could see that was needed, which was a real need for virtual events and brand experiences, and if we could disrupt the ones that were out there. I mean, my background was working in agencies and ended up in sort of experiential side of the business, and there's no polite way of saying it. When the pandemic hit, the arse fell out of it very, very quickly. But when we looked around, there's actually all of the platforms out there were 2D user interface. And so everything became quite passive in the way that you do it. I mean, like many of the people sitting on the call today, they're sitting here just watching us, but a few questions coming in. Whereas what we wanted to do was move from that sort of 2D state into a 3-dimensional one, because once you're in that 3D, you move from a passive state into an active one where you're moving around, you're exploring, you're interacting with other people, you're opening content, you're walking into rooms to watch different things. And for me, then it's all about engagement and the immersiveness of that experience, which drives different behaviors, different memorability, and therefore actually really at the bottom of it, return on investment. So, I mean, our story is a classic kind of startup. We started with that as an idea. We went round with a begging bowl, and we found some brilliant people who joined us on the journey. We sort of hatched the idea around this sort of metaverse brand experience and events platform. We got a few investors on board. Phil Chambers, who came on, who was the founder of Peakon, who sold it to Workday. We could have sort of cried when he said yes, and he could see the benefit of it. But we also were joined by brands along the way, PepsiCo, Lego Foundation, Awesome Cause, Chill Group, and a few others that I can't mention this morning, who can see the benefit of it for a business application. So, what I'll do is I'll just quickly share a quick sort of a quick movie that we created. Hopefully everyone can see that, but I mean, you can tell that we did it during the lockdown because we built on a beautiful island. But the whole idea is it's sort of avatar based. You scan your face, it goes onto the digital avatar. You can walk around that area. You can explore different bits of content. It's agnostic about where it takes broadcast feeds from. You can move into different spaces. You can interact with other people there. There's moderated Q&A, there's various different broadcast functions that you can have, there's polling as part of it. So it's got all of this sort of humanness and stuff that you can do within physical, space, with all of the benefits, because you get lots of immersion and engagement, you get loads of measurement. which was a bugbear of mine when I worked in physical events, because you never knew really the return on investment for the outlay. It's hugely sustainable. So, you know, Charlotte touched on this earlier, but, you know, we ran a 2-day sustainability summit for one of our clients, broadcast into 70 different countries, 3,000 different people. It saved them 338 metric tons of CO2 in the process of doing that. So when, you know, customers are talking about that sort of ESG side of their models, it's absolutely, you know, it's absolutely can play a place of that. And so it becomes also accessible to anyone. So, you know, whether those people are, you know, within their sort of their backdrop of their bedrooms or within the workplace, it's not the usual 3 people who get the tickets to South by Southwest. It democratizes the access to everyone, so that everyone is able to join and no one is held back as a result of that. And then we've offered it as a, you know, a live moment that people can kind of go to and watch a broadcast like today, or an always on. So, you know, so that anyone gets access to it and the information, they can explore around the space like they would do in a simulive way as well.
So clients are able to take this environment, presumably they can actually both adopt it, but equally tailor it to their individual brand requirements. And that space can then obviously be used for all manner of both meetings, events, conferences and seminars, etc., etc.
Yeah, so we're selling it in 3 different ways. It is like literally take it off the shelf, plug in your broadcast and get on with it. Really, really simple to do. Or a heavier customization. All the 3D objects there just sit within a CMS system that people can choose from and link their content to. Or you can build a completely bespoke environment that sits on top of the tool stack. The tool stack is 80% of the hard work, the booking systems, broadcast systems, networking functions, and all of that. So we're talking to 2 universities actually at the moment in the UK about building their business management schools on top of the tool stack. So it allows them to do virtual open days, but they can do it in a hybrid way so that they can reach foreign students who don't need to travel there, but can walk around, see the broadcast from the lecture theatre and interact with students and tutors and find out more about the courses.
And mixed realities, so where there are live events or live activities, but part of the audience can't be there or don't travel, that works also?
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, I mean, I suppose we talk about that as hybrid at the moment, but yeah, that's totally possible within it all. It's just simple broadcast feeds feeding into digital mirrors if people want to build those, or into existing environments.
Thanks, Alistair. Nick Peters has raised a very important question. In fact, we're going to come on to it, so it's completely coincidental, and that is regulation around the metaverse. And as Rohit suggested, you know, government has been late to the game on any new technology, any new platform in terms of regulation. I guess from an advertiser's point of view, that's both a curse and an opportunity. I mean, one of the things that's interesting about this whole environment is that there is first mover advantage, you know, by getting in early, by actually, you know, developing relevant content to the right target audience, you can make big headroads, particularly when other channels are so overpopulated at the moment. But do you see government anytime soon getting to grips with this, Rohit, and actually starting to have some sort of mechanic around what we can and can't do and say?
No. It's simple as that. We're still not protecting people on the internet. We've just seen the social harms bill, which doesn't tackle most of the issues that people wanted protected. And government and regulators have almost no clue about what was going on anyway in the gaming world and the kind of things that were happening there. It was only if you got a shock headline in the Daily Mail or, you know, wherever, that they paid attention. And again, right now, it's almost impossible for them to be monitoring everything that's going on. And most users, if they see something they don't like, they just walk away. They don't tend to report them to anyone. And I think until you get to the point where maybe in 5 years' time, you've got some very clever AI monitoring these things in the same way as it will be monitoring the internet and social media, then you might start to get to some more useful and adaptive regulation. But we're so early in the game right now on metaverses, on the underlying technologies, that you can't possibly regulate for that, the stuff that's being created today you don't even know about, or the stuff that someone will create next week. I think that's one of the exciting bits as well about this space, is that you've got so many young people coming into it who don't know you're not supposed to do that, and who know no limits. They're willing to experiment. They're willing to put stuff out there that doesn't really work completely, but they let the audience test it for them. And that's really hard to regulate for, but it's very exciting from an innovation and creativity point of view that you're unleashing this whole generation of talent that's grown up in these worlds and now has an opportunity to really create on a much larger scale. So there's a trade-off there between enabling the jobs of the future, which is really important, and the industries of the future, and over-regulating. And my guess is that by accident, we'll do more to enable the jobs of the future rather than by design. And then regulation will come, but I don't think it will really stop anyone doing anything that they want to do in terms of communication. It might just be some of the things you can do with your avatar in the space. That would be my view. I mean, I guess Charlotte and Alistair might have different views.
Charlotte, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind you picking up on that same point.
Yeah, I mean, sort of very aligned with what you're saying, Rohit. And I think a lot of the, intent with the metaverse and, with, the ambition for decentralized autonomous organizations is that it is community moderated, in that it's, the community reporting back, sort of, indicating where things are not working, they're not happy with them, or that that there are changes that they want made to sort of how those spaces operate. But you're right, it's still incredibly early days, and as we've all seen, that even social media giants aren't really being properly regulated right now. So there is work to be done, and I think that that sort of rests on people who are in these communities, brands, when they get engaged, sort of making sure that they are behaving in a way that is, respectful, that, is beginning to sort of, set some standards for the way that brands should be showing up. But, it will over time begin to sort of have more regulation. And I think, the sort of key things, obviously, for a lot of people are concerns around, sort of data privacy, around sort of security in these spaces. But it's still evolving. It's very, very early days. So I'm sure we will see sort of more happening across this space.
In terms of the platforms themselves, I mean, I guess like any media buy, one is actually obviously trying to find the one that's got the best reach, and also best frequency, and also it's efficient in terms of cost. Is there a media planning element to this? I mean, if a client comes to you and says, look, I need to reach this audience, first of all, are they engaging in the space, and if so, where do we go?
Yeah, and again, I'd say that it's still sort of quite early days. When we're talking about some of these platforms, they haven't been around that long. We're talking about sort of a few years for some of them, some even more recent than that. But they are obviously recognizing that there is opportunity here, and therefore they are becoming much more astute in being able to create their own dashboards, be able to provide information around what the demographics are, what the engagement levels are, what particular events, experiences, activations are performing particularly well, and therefore help guide both agencies and brands in what they need to be doing as well. So that, again, is going to be something that evolves more, and that there will be more clarity over the more that brands get involved with it. But a lot of this, I think, is about really piloting, going and trying this, learning from what you're doing, taking sort of, learnings and input from how you are showing up in these spaces, looking at what other brands are doing, beginning to start having a bit of a sense of a benchmark around, what is good engagement? What are you expecting in terms of people's time spent within this? What are you looking at in terms of your return on that investment? Is it that you are trialing your wearables and seeing, what the appetite for purchase is? Is it actually that what you are trying to do is build a sort of a longer term engaged community that ultimately will become sort of customers of you in the physical world as much as in, the digital world? So being very clear about what you want to achieve with it, and beginning to sort of, start to extrapolate what the metrics for success are going to be. And as I said, many of these platforms are very sort of open and willing to sort of engage with you in helping on that journey, because it's in their interests too.
So it sounds like actually lots of the rules within, say, social apply far more here than, say, a broadcast medium like television or elsewhere, where obviously it's a much harder sales message and much more focused on obviously getting consumer engagement and selling stuff. For now, it's about actually building an audience, developing a conversation, entertaining and engaging, such that you earn the right to be able to actually, I guess, sell at some point in the future.
Absolutely. And, I think there are some really good examples where, brands really are seeing this actually pay off for them in terms of, direct sort of revenue results as a result of what they've sort of been creating in these spaces. But if you look at Nikeland on Roblox, it's an incredibly sort of immersive experience. They've got gamified components. You get rewarded when you're interacting. That's what they're sort of building here, and it's paying off in terms of how people are purchasing on the platform Nike, branded merch. But they're building a much bigger ecosystem there. It isn't just about going in there and having sort of their brand slapped across wearable objects. It's about creating something that's of value.
Okay, thank you. The question from Jeremy Hemmings, and it's a kind of question I guess could direct to both of you, but also Alistair. Obviously, the graphics quality at the moment isn't necessarily reflective of where one wants to be. A lot of the stuff is kind of more Disney than Pixar. How do we get to a more lifelike end of this? Obviously it involves time and money, of course, but particularly I guess for luxury brands. And if you take a Hermes, or you take a Fortnum Masons, there's one for you, Jeremy. How do they actually present their brand in an environment with their same brand cues?
Is that to me?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, but back to the sort of fidelity, I think, in the imagery and the environments. I mean, I think we chose not to go with the gaming engine, and the reason for that is very simply the sort of the cost of it for cloud for businesses, with pixel streaming, and with also the fact that computers need better GPUs to kind of process it. So what it did for us is it actually reduced the market. It wasn't democratized, and therefore it wasn't a good business option to us. And also it meant that we couldn't, we would be beholden to the software companies for our own business. There's three things going on with the quality and the sort of timing of that, I think, is how long is a piece of string, which is the first, it's a hardware issue. I think in a lot of this, I think a lot of people want mixed reality. I think that will be really the coming of age of the metaverse. And mixed reality, there simply isn't the hardware out there at the moment, I think, that really delivers the consumer expectation around resolution. I think there's also an issue around cloud provision in terms of the capabilities and the rendering capabilities and the cost of that. And then the third one is sort of the network ability of all of this. 5G gives us a real possibility on this, but the reality is 5G hasn't been realized yet. And that is down really to cost and focus, and it's been focused around private networks really more at the moment. And so this sort of dream of lower latency and kind of higher throughput has not been realized yet, I don't think, and greater distribution. So I mean, really what we need one of the big providers like a Samsung and Apple to come back with a brilliant piece of hardware that that becomes a fashion accessory, like they've done so well over the years. We need the network provision to be there, and we need network providers, cloud providers, and hardware all really to come together. And that, I think, it will be when you really see the sort of a new dawn of where we're at the moment.
That said, the only thing I'd say, Stephen, is I completely agree with everything Alistair says, but I don't think any of those tech issues are going to stop brands creating. They aren't going to stop the metaverse developers building, and they're certainly not going to stop users getting involved. Like, I've never heard my son, who's deep into these things, I've never heard him say, "Oh, Dad, I'm not going to go into this metaverse because of the latency issues, or because their tech stack isn't good enough, or the graphics still look like 1990s video games." He loves it. He's happy. And I think that's one of our challenges is to not get too sniffy about whether or not the graphics are photorealistic. but understanding kind of how the audience sees this and how the graphics actually play a part of their experience. And they like the fact that it's not like watching a movie, it's something very different. And I think that's a big challenge for brands and the ad agencies who are serving them actually is to get that and to understand that you don't need perfection. You work with what people are using today, and you work out how to use those in an engaging manner. And then there will always be breakthroughs there. I completely I wouldn't be surprised at all if someone next week came out and said, we've created a really smart AI tool that allows you to render in almost real time photorealistic graphics. I think all kind of predictions are really off here. It could take 5 years, but you could see breakthroughs within the next 12 months.
I think you've made such a good point there, though, Rohit, which is that, again, it's not about transposing, the expectations of real world or, sort of a massive blockbuster film onto the experience on this these platforms in the metaverse, which is, recognizing that this isn't about creating digital twins of any of those experiences. It's a different platform in the same way that, content that you sort of show, on a streaming channel or on Netflix is not going to look the same on TikTok. TikTok's success has been because it's completely different type of content, very UGC, much less polished. In the same way, experiences that people are having on metaverse platforms, to your point with it, it's not people are going, oh, I'm a bit sort of disappointed this is slightly pixelated, because then they're trying to complete the scavenger hunt in order to win the prizes which unlock particular rewards. There's a different there's a different set of requirements, and I think that the smart brands are recognizing that they can still be recognizable as that brand, but they're just showing up in a different way because the platform has different limitations, but those can also be quite freeing because it allows you to think laterally about how your brand can be experienced, not literally.
Okay, and I think that's very fair. When we think about the development of any new channel, actually in the early days, it has limitations both technically, but equally too, it creates its own rule book and its own way of doing things. Chris Smith, can I bring you into the conversation here? Are you able to ask your question, please?
Yeah, of course. I've been kind of following the beginnings of Web3 since about May last year. And I've been collecting NFTs and I'm kind of in the Bored Ape Yacht Club and watched it all unfold, with a lot of enthusiasm. But I was just kind of putting there in the chat that I think one of the main drivers towards this Web3 and decentralization of everything is the fact that you get to kind of keep hold of all that data. You don't have to, sell your soul for everything, to be part of this kind of metaverse world and the kind of new wave of the internet. And I think one very clear thing at the minute is that you can kind of pinpoint anybody based on the likes, demographics, age, gender. And I just think if people are moving towards that kind of anonymity across the internet and keeping hold of all that information, how easy it's going to be for marketers to be able to direct content towards them or, pinpoint people in that space and, serve them up meaningful content.
Thanks, Chris. I mean, is there a question there that you actually would like the panel to answer?
Yeah, I thought just a discussion point really to see, it's obviously a room full of marketers and marketing agencies that, it's a potential problem and issue that I kind of foresee across this space.
Right, do you want to answer that one?
Sure. Well, I mean, the whole point of decentralization is that you can't do the things you just talked about, that I want to hold my data and I don't want you marketing to me based on my personal information, unless I permission you to have access to that. So it's more about understanding communities and how you engage communities. And then if you want my data, well, what are you going to offer me in order for me to give you that data? What's a compelling enough offer to get my data? So you mentioned NFTs. Etihad have just done a brilliant one where they launched an NFT to celebrate, I think it was their 20th anniversary. They had 2,003 of them. And over 50% of the people who bought them had never bought an NFT, had never bought a flight before. So they were reaching a new audience. but also they gave people silver tier status in their rewards program. And at that point, you had to give them the data if you wanted to take that up. So you were really getting the data from people who most wanted to engage with you. And I think that's perhaps another thing that we haven't talked about yet, which is this idea of using the technologies to reach new audiences. So one of the things the travel industry saw during the pandemic was you made no money because you were shut. And so destinations, leisure experiences, airlines, airports are now all rushing to create metaverse experiences, both in case there's another sort of shutdown, but also to reach that 60 to 70% of the world who will never get on a plane. So how do you reach the people who would never walk through your door? Well, the metaverses give you the opportunity to do that. And the Ariana Grande concert, the Marshmello concert, all of these things where you're getting tens of millions of people, show how you can take your proposition to a massive new audience. And actually, you don't need to know a lot about them for them to come in and buy. I don't think the Ariana Grande people cared because they got $20 million out of it. They didn't need your personal data. But if they wanted more of your data, then they create things that require you to give them more information. So I think it's a change in the marketing mindset as well, to much more about creating experiences that you engage with rather than personalized and targeted content and offers.
Yeah, this comes back to what Charlotte was saying there on about the value exchange. And actually, you know, if you engage people and deliver content that they actually want, then actually have a far higher chance of actually turning it into commercial success in the future. And with that in mind, we have two final questions. The time is racing away with us. And I think the first one is really, having listened to what you've listened to this morning, I'm sort of talking to really the brand owners, the marketeers, the CMOs on today's call. What I want to understand really is how one would go about trying to persuade them actually next year, 2023, which is going to be a tight year, shall we say, for budgets. How would you go about persuading a client to make an investment in the metaverse? Anyone?
I think it's about, you know, it's kind of come up along this call anyway. It's not about just doing it because it's a gimmick, because it's a buzzword, because your nearest competitor is doing it. It's about really understanding why you're doing it, what you're doing with your brand, and who you are engaging with. So, you know, take a little bit of a step back first, and then, you know, look at building out a test and learn experience. So put some of, you know, have an R&D budget. Say, we are going to pilot next year and we will look at these 3 platforms and we'll make a decision about which is the right one, and we will invest a small amount of money and we will look at what we can, you know, what are our key objectives? What are we trying to do with this? Are we trying to sort of reach a completely new audience that we haven't been able to engage with before? Are we trying to start building a new community who are going to, you know, there's going to be a long tail of advocacy and loyalty with this community, but it's a commitment to, you know, a longer term plan? Is it that we're actually using it to trial a revenue stream? So we're going to trial whether or not our brand could potentially have a direct to avatar offering, or, you know, wearables that people are willing to purchase. Perhaps you should then think about giving free wearables away first of all, in order to test what that appetite is like. So I think be really clear about why you're doing it, and not just doing it because it's a buzzword, making sure that you are kind of clear about the platform, the opportunity, the audience, and then look at apportioning those small budgets, because it's not about kind of just jumping onto the first bandwagon, and it's also not necessarily about huge budgets, and you can still, you know, do quite a lot of things with relatively small budgets that will begin to give you a really good read about how your brand is being experienced by this new audience. And I'd just say also, just don't be scared, you know, just find people in your team, or find people, you know, who you can partner with, to start immersing yourself in the platforms that you think could be the right ones for you, and just, you know, try it, just start, you know, experiencing for yourself, because that will give you a really good read of what people are doing in these spaces, you know. And people who are playing Roblox are different to those that might be playing Fortnite. They're different to those who are on, you know, on an app called Dressed, which is actually targeting a millennial women, which is much more around styling, for example. So there's different platforms that might be better suited to your brand. And you won't know that unless you start getting out there and trying it.
Okay, thank you, Charlotte. And just very quickly before I go to Alistair with a similar question, what is the cost of entry? What's kind of minimum you think you should put aside if you want to actually do a test of this nature?
I mean, £25,000. I don't know. I mean, it's really depends on it. I mean, for me, the biggest thing on this is exactly what Charlotte said. Is it's not a case of why you should do it. It's sort of why you should do it next year. It's like, why wouldn't you? You know, it gives you access to global audiences. You could measure it. It's sustainable. It hits all of the core things that businesses need to be focusing on. And I think it's not about trying to, literally boil the ocean and got to create this huge, job for yourself. It's like, take the baby steps, change what you would have done as a virtual event into a 3D one, see the different engagement levels, hear the feedback from that. We're seeing with what we're doing is that actually it's become a journey. We started with virtual events, but people can use the platform, and they said, well, actually we can use it for HR functions, so training, education, because actually really all it is a three-dimensional space that you can use in different ways. And I think a lot of it is that there's been so much hype about it that people are worried about taking those first steps in. But I mean, what I've seen is every brand that we have worked with so far have got past all of that sort of digital discomfort, if you like, and they're like, why we need to do this again, and we want to try it like this now.
Right, if I may, can I turn to you for kind of your final thoughts, if you don't mind?
Yeah, I think this is metaverses are just like people's reactions to the internet, social media, e-commerce, smartphones. There's always a reluctance at first, and I would say most of the people we talk to about this, our advice is stay in your lane, because you're not ready. Emotionally, intellectually, you're not ready. You think you've got your next couple of years tied away, you're sorted. And if there's a level of resistance, we just say to people that don't. But if you think that there's an opportunity here to reach your audience in a different way and generate new revenues, or reach a different audience, then it's worth doing all the things that Charlotte and Alistair have just said. Look at who's there, look at what other brands are doing and how they're monetizing it, talk to some people who can develop something. And then it's about sort of pushing on a slightly open door and saying, let's experiment. I think the other thing is to be really clear that this is very much the early days of metaverses, and what they look like and what people are doing with them today is a tiny amount of what we'll be doing in a year's time, or 3 years or 5 years time. I don't think they're going away. I think there's lots of issues to be worked out. They haven't all been thought through yet, but they will tackle some of them over time. Some we may never tackle, like regulation. But I think it's worth experimenting if you've got any kind of sense that you might be open to new revenue streams and new ways of engaging with customers in the future.
Brilliant. That's a great summary from you all. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you to all of you for joining us today. If you'd like to know more or would like some help in navigating this new world, just drop me a line at stephen.knight@pimento.co.uk. We will be back in the new year with a series of webinars, podcasts, blogs, and white papers on all things that matter to marketeers, brands, businesses, and agencies. But for now, once again, thank you very much to our panel. Thank you for all of you who attended. A copy of today's event will be posted later on YouTube. If you go to YouTube and just search Pimento Agency, you'll find all of our content there, including today's event. And equally too, we will be sending you a copy of the full presentations from each of our panelists today. So once again, thank you very much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day, whether it's in the metaverse, reality, or somewhere else in between. Have a great day. Thank you.